Please, don't take them away from me." In the cold rain of an October night, a poor mother stood trembling in a world with no way out. She had no money, no power, only 3 children, and a heart exhausted from love. But in that very moment of weakness, she was seen by the most powerful man in the city. He shouldn't have cared. He shouldn't have stopped, because his world was built on things that could swallow her whole at any moment. But when their eyes met in the darkness, something changed, not pity, but a thread of fate pulling 2 people from opposite worlds closer together. And from that moment on, everything began to shift. Not just her life, but also the heart that had long gone cold within him. But they didn't know that. The price of this salvation could be everything. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. October 2025 draped New York City in a damp early autumn chill. Brooklyn's streets glistened under sodium lamps, the kind that turned rain-slick sidewalks into mirrors of blurred neon and shadow. In a narrow walk-up above a shuttered bodega on Flatbush Avenue, Emily Harper lay curled on a thin mattress that sagged in the middle like defeat itself. The room smelled of mildew and yesterday's takeout, the only heat coming from a space heater that rattled like it was coughing its last breaths. She was 28, though hunger and sleepless nights had carved lines around her eyes that made her look older. Her dark hair fell in lank strands across a face pale from too many skipped meals. The children slept beside her, Joey 5 years old, his small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Lily and Lucas, the 3-year-old twins, tangled together under a blanket so threadbare it was more holes than fabric. Emily had not eaten since the lunch shift at Dino's Diner 2 days earlier, when she'd pocketed half a grilled cheese left on a table, rather than throw it away. The tips had been meager $3.27 after pooling with the other waitresses, and the landlord had knocked again that morning. Voice muffled through the door, promising eviction by week's end if the rent did not appear. She stared at the ceiling cracks that spiderwebbed like veins, her stomach a tight knot of nausea and fear. How do I tell them we're losing this place? The thought looped endlessly, a quiet torment that pressed against her ribs until breathing hurt. Across the East River, in a brownstone fortress tucked behind iron gates on a quiet block in Carroll Gardens, Vincent Russo stood at a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the harbor lights. At 36, he carried the weight of a life built on control, fair-skinned, broad-shouldered, with the kind of sharp features that made people look twice and then look away. His dark hair was neatly combed, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection, yet the eyes that watched the city were haunted. The mansion, 5 stories of old stone and modern steel, hummed with quiet luxury marble floors, polished to a gleam leather-bound books. No one read a fireplace that burned without warmth. 2 small girls slept upstairs in rooms that felt too large for them. Sophie 4 and Mia 3, his daughters from a marriage that had ended in blood and silence when a rival's bullet found his wife 3 years earlier. The children had not smiled, not truly, since that day. They flinched at loud voices, clung to each other, and regarded their father with the wary distance of strangers who shared a roof. Vincent's hand tightened around the crystal tumbler of bourbon he had not touched. Guilt gnawed at him like a living thing, relentless and sharp-toothed. I should have seen it coming. I should have kept her safe. The remorse coiled tighter every night, a violent conflict between the man he had become powerful, feared untouchable, and the father he failed to be. He had built an empire on calculated risks and swift retribution, yet nothing could buy back the laughter that once filled these halls. Tonight the ache felt heavier, as if the city itself pressed against the glass, reminding him of every choice that led here. The phone buzzed on the desk behind him. A low voice from one of his men. "Boss, Marco's crew is moving on the waterfront. Word is they're looking to push into our territory tonight. You want us to handle it quiet." Vincent's jaw clenched. Marco Delgado. The Blade had been circling for months, testing boundaries with small thefts, veiled threats, and the occasional drive-by that left warning shots in brick walls. No blood yet, but the promise hung in the air like smoke. Vincent exhaled slowly. "Keep eyes on them. No moves unless they force it. I don't want fireworks tonight." He set the phone down and rubbed his temple. The war inside him flared. Part of him craved the clean release of action. The other part recoiled at the thought of more violence touching his daughter's world. He turned back to the window, the city lights blurring through, a sudden sting in his eyes he refused to acknowledge. Miles away, Emily rose from the mattress, joints aching from the cold floorboards. She slipped on a coat 2 sizes too large found in a donation bin last winter and eased the door open. The hallway light flickered, casting long shadows. She needed air or perhaps just distance from the weight of her own helplessness. Down the narrow stairs, past peeling paint and the faint smell of cooking grease from the apartment below, she stepped into the street. The wind cut through her thin jeans, raising goosebumps on arms already trembling from exhaustion. She walked toward the avenue, head down, arms wrapped around herself. Dino's diner was closed, but the neon sign still glowed faintly, a mocking reminder of shifts that paid too little and demanded too much. She paused under a street lamp breath, fogging the air, and pressed her palms to her face. Tears came then, hot and silent, born of a humiliation so deep it felt physical. I can't even keep the lights on. How am I supposed to keep them safe? The thought tore at her, numbing her fingers, making her sway on her feet. A black SUV rolled slowly past windows, tinted engine a low growl. Emily barely noticed until it stopped at the corner. Doors opened. 3 men stepped out, dark coats, hard faces. One carried a bat loosely at his side. They moved toward a small bodega that stayed open late. The owner, a quiet older man who had once given Joey a free apple when the boy looked hungry. Emily froze. She knew these men by reputation, Marco's crew shaking down businesses that paid protection to the wrong side. The owner appeared in the doorway, hands raised, voice pleading. Words drifted on the wind. I paid last week. Please. One man laughed low and ugly. The bat rose. Something snapped in Emily. Not courage, desperation. She stepped forward before she could think. Stop, she called, voice thin but steady. He's telling the truth. Leave him alone. The men turned. The one with the bat tilted his head, amused. Look at this. Little Mouse wants to play hero. Emily's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. Her legs trembled, but she did not step back. The owner looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. She swallowed. Just go, please. The leader smirked, stepping closer. You got money to pay his tab, sweetheart. She shook her head, cheeks burning with shame. No, but hurting him won't get you anything. He laughed again, harsher. The bat swung not at the owner, but low, clipping a stack of milk crates. Plastic cracked. Bottles shattered on the sidewalk. Emily flinched, glass skittering near her shoes. Next time the man said, "It'll be your knees." They climbed back into the SUV and drove off, taillights fading into the rain. Emily stood there, shaking breath ragged. The owner rushed out, pressing a small bag of groceries into her hands, bread, milk, apples. Thank you, he whispered. God bless you. She could only nod, throat too tight for words. She turned toward home, legs unsteady, the bag heavy in her arms, though it held almost nothing. Behind her, unnoticed at first, another vehicle had stopped half a block away. Vincent Russo stepped out of the back seat, coat collar turned up against the wind. He had come personally to check on the waterfront rumor, only to witness the scene from the shadows. Now he watched the young woman walk away, thin frame, hesitant steps, the way she clutched the bag like a lifeline. Something stirred in him, sharp and unfamiliar. Not pity, recognition. Of hunger. Of fear. Of standing alone against the world and somehow still standing. His driver murmured. Boss Vincent did not answer. His gaze lingered on her retreating figure until she disappeared around the corner. Inside his chest, a long dormant ache flared, guilt for the city he helped rule through, fear, remorse for the lives caught in the crossfire. And something deeper, more dangerous. A sudden fierce urge to protect this one fragile soul who had dared to speak against the dark. He turned away, jaw tight, the conflict raging anew. Who is she? The question lodged in him like a blade, twisting with every step back to the SUV. Emily reached her building, climbed the stairs on numb legs, and slipped inside. She set the groceries on the counter, such a small bounty, and sank to the floor beside the sleeping children. Joey stirred, blinking up at her with sleepy eyes. Mama, I'm here, she whispered, voice cracking. She pulled him close, then reached for the twins. Their small bodies curled into her, trusting warm despite everything. Tears fell again, silent and endless. I can't keep doing this alone. Across the city, Vincent stood once more at his window, the tumbler forgotten. The image of the woman under the street lamp burned behind his eyes, her defiance, her exhaustion, her quiet strength. For the first time in years, the guilt inside him shifted, not easing but reshaping, into something alive. Something that felt dangerously like hope. And somewhere in the space between their worlds, fate drew its first invisible thread, thin, trembling, but unbreakable. The rain came harder that night in October 2025, turning Brooklyn's sidewalks into shallow rivers of black water and reflected streetlight. Emily Harper had returned to the apartment with the small bag of groceries the bodega owner had pressed into her hands. She divided the bread carefully, 3 slices for tomorrow's breakfast, the rest wrapped in foil so it would not grow stale too quickly. The milk went into the refrigerator that hummed unevenly, its interior lit only when the door opened. She fed the children first a little warm milk for Lily and Lucas, who drank with sleepy trust, and a piece of bread with the thinnest smear of peanut butter for Joey, who ate slowly, watching her face, as though he could read the worry she tried to hide. When they were asleep again, Emily sat on the edge of the mattress, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. The wind rattled the single pane of glass in the window, slipping through cracks she had tried to seal with duct tape months ago. Her coat lay across her lap like a useless shield. She had not slept more than 3 hours in any night for weeks. The landlord's last visit had left her counting every dollar every minute until the next shift. Her body felt hollow ribs sharp under thin-skinned cheeks, sunken from meals that were more air than food. Yet the children slept. That was enough to keep her sitting upright, staring into the dark, whispering prayers she barely believed anymore. Across the river, Vincent Russo had not returned to the mansion. Instead, he directed the driver to circle the waterfront warehouses where Marco Delgado's men were rumored to be gathering. The black SUV moved silently through Red Hook headlights, off engine a low murmur. Vincent sat in the back coat, unbuttoned hands resting on his knees. The bourbon from earlier still lingered in his throat, bitter and warm, but it did nothing to quiet the storm inside him. Every mile brought the same relentless loop, the woman under the street lamp, her small voice cutting through the night, her thin frame standing against 3 men who could have crushed her without effort. Why did she do it? The question burned, feeding a remorse that had no name yet. He had spent years building walls of power to keep guilt at bay, yet tonight those walls cracked. He saw her face again, pale, determined, exhausted, and something fierce and unfamiliar rose in his chest, the need to shield her, to pull her out of the cold she endured alone. The radio crackled. One of his men. They're at Pier 17. 3 vehicles. Looks like they're unloading crates, probably the shipment we were watching. Vincent's voice came low, controlled. Stay back. We watch. No contact unless they move on our territory. But the night had other plans. A sudden screech of tires echoed from a side street. Vincent's driver braked hard. Ahead, 2 of Marco's SUVs had blocked the road engines, idling, headlights blinding. Doors opened. 5 men stepped out, coats open, hands visible but ready. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, raised a hand in mock greeting. Russo, he called, voice carrying over the rain. Thought you'd stay home with the kids tonight. Vincent stepped out slowly, rain immediately, soaking his hair and shoulders. He felt the weight of the pistol at his side but kept both hands loose. You're in the wrong neighborhood, Tony. Tony smiled, teeth flashing. Just business. Marco says hello. Says you've been distracted lately. Vincent's pulse hammered, but his face remained stone. Inside, the conflict raged. Part of him wanted to end this now, to silence the taunt with force he knew too well. The other part remembered Sophie's small hand clutching his sleeve that morning, asking why Daddy was always gone. He forced calm. Tell Marco if he wants to talk, he calls. Not this. Tony laughed. You're getting soft, Vinny. Used to be you'd handle things quicker. One of Marco's men shifted hand, drifting toward his waist. Vincent's driver tensed behind him. The air thickened, rain drumming on metal roofs like a countdown. Then Vincent spoke, voice quiet but carrying. Walk away. Tonight. Or tomorrow you explain to Marco why his crew came home short 2 men. Tony studied him, then spat on the wet pavement. Your call, he signaled. The men climbed back into the SUVs. Engines revved. They pulled away slowly, taillights bleeding red into the rain. Vincent stood motionless until they were gone. Only then did he exhale, the breath shaky. The encounter had been nothing, posturing a warning, but it left him raw. Soft. The word lodged like a splinter. He had never been soft. Yet tonight, the thought of that woman, of what softness might look like if it meant protecting someone who needed it, felt less like weakness and more like a lifeline he had forgotten existed. He turned to the driver. Take me back to Flatbush. The diner block. The driver did not question. Emily had stepped out again, unable to stay inside the suffocating quiet. She needed to walk, to move, to outrun the panic that clawed at her throat. The streets were empty now, rain heavier, wind slicing through her coat. She reached the corner near Dino's, paused under the same street lamp. Her legs trembled, dizziness swept in waves. She pressed a hand to the metal pole to steady herself, vision blurring at the edges. Just breathe. Just keep breathing. Headlights cut through the downpour. A black SUV slowed, then stopped. The rear door opened. Vincent stepped out, rain streaming down his face. He did not approach too quickly, did not want to startle her. He stopped 5 feet away, hands visible, voice low against the wind. You okay? Emily flinched. Her eyes widened, recognition hitting like cold water. The man from the shadows earlier, the one who had watched without interfering. Fear surged first, then confusion. She straightened, though her knees threatened to buckle. I'm fine, she said softly, voice timid, polite. From years of serving people who could ruin her day with a single complaint. Thank you. Vincent studied her thin wrists, hollow cheeks, the way she held herself together through sheer will. The sight tore at him a violent twist in his chest. She's starving. She's freezing. And she still stood up to them. Remorse flooded him hot and merciless. All the money in his accounts, all the power he wielded, and he had let nights like this happen in his city. "You don't look fine," he said gently. "You're shaking." Emily's lips trembled. She looked down at the pavement rain pooling around her worn sneakers. "I just needed air." He took one careful step closer. "My name is Vincent. I saw what you did earlier. For the bodega owner." Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "You were there." He nodded once. "I didn't step in. I should have." She swallowed confusion, warring with a flicker of curiosity. "Why are you here now?" Vincent hesitated. The truth felt too large, too dangerous. Yet he could not lie to her, not tonight. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you standing there alone. Because I know what it costs to stand up when you have nothing left to lose." Emily's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her that way, seen her that way. Horror and hope collided inside her, dizzying. She swayed slightly, hand tightening on the pole. Vincent moved without thinking, arm outstretched to steady her. She flinched at first, then let him guide her to the side of the SUV, out of the wind. He opened the rear door. "Sit. Just for a minute. You're going to fall if you don't." She stared at the leather interior, so clean, so warm-looking compared to her world. Suspicion flared, but exhaustion won. She slid inside, trembling violently now. Vincent closed the door gently, then climbed in beside her, leaving space between them. The heater blew soft warmth. Emily closed her eyes, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "I don't know what you want," she whispered. "I don't want anything," Vincent said, voice rough with emotion he could not hide. I can't leave you out here like this." She opened her eyes, meeting his. In that moment, something shifted, violent, sudden, overwhelming. Vincent felt it like a blow, love fierce and burning, rising from a place he had thought long dead. Not pity, not obligation. Love raw, protective, consuming for this woman who had nothing yet gave everything she had. The realization tore through him, guilt and longing, twisting together until he could barely breathe. How can I feel this? How can I want to keep her safe when I've spent my life destroying safety for others? Emily saw the change in his face, the sudden rawness, the conflict. Fear spiked again, but beneath it something warmer stirred curiosity, a fragile hope she dared not name. Vincent spoke quietly. "Let me take you home. Or somewhere warm. Please." She looked toward the darkened diner, then back at him. Her voice was small, broken. "I have children. 3 of them. They're alone." Vincent's heart lurched. "Then we get them. All of you. Tonight." Emily searched his eyes, powerful, haunted, strangely gentle. The world narrowed to this moment, rain drumming on the roof, heat wrapping around her like a promise, and a man who looked at her as though she were the only thing worth saving. She nodded once, barely a movement. Vincent signaled the driver. The SUV pulled away from the curb, carrying them toward the walk-up on Flatbush, toward the children, toward a collision of worlds that neither could yet imagine. Inside Vincent's chest, the storm raged louder than ever, remorse for the life he had led, guilt for the danger he might bring her, and an overwhelming, burning need to protect her, to give her the safety she had never known. He glanced at her profile, pale and fragile against the leather seat, and knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The rain fell harder, washing the city clean as 2 lives began slowly and terrifyingly to intertwine. The black SUV glided through the rain-slick streets of Flatbush like a shadow given form, headlights carving soft tunnels through the downpour. Inside, Emily Harper sat rigid against the leather seat, hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles showed white beneath the thin skin. The heater wrapped her in unfamiliar warmth, but it could not stop the trembling that came from more than cold. Every few seconds, she glanced sideways at Vincent Russo, his profile sharp in the dim glow from the dashboard, jaw set, eyes fixed on the road ahead. She had never been this close to a man who carried power the way he did, quiet, absolute, dangerous in its stillness. Her heart thudded unevenly, a frantic rhythm of fear and something she refused to name. They reached the walk-up in minutes. The building looked smaller, more broken from the vantage of the SUV's tinted windows. Paint peeled in long strips from the front door. A single bulb flickered above the buzzer that no longer worked. Emily's stomach twisted with fresh humiliation. He sees this. He sees where we live. She reached for the door handle, voice barely above a whisper. "I'll just get them. It won't take long." Vincent turned to her, then eyes dark and unreadable in the low light. "I'm coming up with you." She froze, confusion flooding her. "You don't have to, I do." His tone left no room for argument, yet it carried no threat, only a strange, aching gentleness that made her chest hurt. "You're not carrying 3 sleeping children down those stairs alone." "Not tonight," Emily swallowed. She nodded once, small and uncertain, and led him inside. The stairwell smelled of old cooking oil and damp plaster. Each step creaked under Vincent's polished shoes. Emily's sneakers made no sound at all. She kept her eyes on the worn linoleum, afraid to see what he saw. The missing handrail, the graffiti tags, half scrubbed away the trash bag someone had left leaking in the corner. At the third-floor landing, she paused, hand on the doorknob, dizziness sweeping over her again. The world tilted. She gripped the frame to keep from swaying. Vincent's hand appeared at her elbow, light, steady, careful not to startle. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you." The touch sent a shock through her, warm and electric. She pulled away instinctively, cheeks burning. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Inside, everything churned terror at letting a stranger, however kind, see this place, shame that burned hotter than fever, and a wild, disorienting curiosity. Why is he here? Why does he care? She pushed the door open. The single room lay in dim shadow, lit only by the faint orange glow from a street lamp outside. Joey slept curled on his side thumb near his mouth, even at 5 years old. Lily and Lucas lay tangled together on the far edge of the mattress, small chests rising and falling in perfect unison. The air smelled of damp laundry and the faint sweetness of the milk Emily had warmed earlier. A single folding chair stood against the wall. The kitchenette consisted of a hot plate, a tiny sink, and 3 mismatched plates stacked beside the faucet that dripped in slow, steady rhythm. Emily moved quickly, gathering the few things she could not leave behind, a worn backpack with the children's spare clothes. Joey's favorite stuffed bear with one ear missing, the thin blankets that barely kept the cold out at night. Her hands shook so badly she dropped the bear once. Vincent bent to retrieve it before she could, holding it out to her without a word. Their fingers brushed. She jerked back as though burned. He did not comment. Instead, he stepped to the mattress and without hesitation lifted Lucas, first cradling the boy against his broad chest with a gentleness that made Emily's throat close. Lucas stirred but did not wake, nestling instinctively into the warmth of Vincent's coat. Vincent then bent again, gathering Lily into his other arm. The twins looked impossibly small against him, their faces peaceful in sleep. Emily stared frozen. No one had ever helped her like this. No one had ever touched her children with such quiet care. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and sudden. She turned away, busying herself with Joey. Vincent's voice came low behind her. "I'll carry them down. You take the bag." She nodded mutely, slinging the backpack over one thin shoulder. It felt heavier than it should. Downstairs, the driver waited beside the open rear doors. Vincent settled the twins carefully across the middle seat, buckling them in with practiced ease. Emily climbed in beside Joey, pulling him onto her lap. The boy woke just enough to blink up at her, then at Vincent. "Who's that, Mama?" Emily's voice trembled. "A friend. He's helping us tonight." Joey studied Vincent with solemn eyes, then leaned his head against Emily's chest and drifted off again. The SUV pulled away from the curb. Emily watched the walk-up shrink in the side mirror until it vanished into the rain. A quiet sob escaped her, soft, strangled. She pressed her lips together, trying to hold the rest inside. Vincent sat in the front passenger seat, turned slightly so he could see her. His face was unreadable, but his hands resting on his knees were clenched into fists, so tight the knuckles stood white. Inside him the storm raged fiercer than ever. "This is what I've allowed. This is what my world creates. Children sleeping on the floor, a woman starving herself to keep them fed." Remorse clawed at him, violent and unrelenting. He had built walls of money and power to keep such sights from touching him, yet here they were, sitting in his car, wrapped in his coat, breathing the same air he breathed. And the woman who had carried it all alone, thin, exhausted, unbreakable, stirred something in him so deep it felt like pain. He loved her already. The realization struck like a physical blow, fierce, burning, impossible to deny. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in the quiet, worn way of someone who had fought every day to survive. Not because she needed saving. Because she had stood in the rain and said stop when no one else would. Because she had looked at her sleeping children and kept going when everything inside her screamed to stop. The love came sudden and consuming, tangled with guilt so thick he could barely breathe. "I don't deserve this feeling. I don't deserve her." The SUV crossed the Brooklyn Bridge. Manhattan lights glittered ahead, cold and distant. Emily stared out the window, numb. The warmth of the car, the softness of the seat, Joey's steady breathing against her. It all felt unreal, like a dream she would wake from any moment to find herself back on the thin mattress, cold wind slipping through the cracks. They reached Carroll Gardens. The gates opened silently. The mansion rose before them, stone and glass and quiet power windows glowing with soft golden light. Emily's breath caught. She had seen houses like this only in magazines, never imagined stepping inside one. Vincent turned in his seat. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "All of you." She met his eyes. Fear still lived there, sharp and bright, but beneath it something shifted, curiosity, fragile hope, the first faint stirrings of trust. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Vincent hesitated. The truth felt too vast, too dangerous. Yet he owed her something honest. "Because tonight I saw someone stand up when they had every reason to stay down. Because I've spent too long looking away from people like you. Because—" his voice cracked just barely. "Because I can't walk away from you. Not now." Emily's heart lurched. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through every hollow place inside her. Shock numbed her fingers. Confusion made her head spin. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered beyond the next tip, the next shift. Tears spilled over before she could stop them. Vincent reached out slowly, palm open. She stared at his hand, strong, steady, unmarked by the cold and hunger she knew so well. After a long moment, she placed her trembling fingers in his. His grip closed, gently warm and sure. Inside him, the conflict roared, louder than ever, guilt for the life he had led, terror that his world might taint hers, and love, fierce, protective, overwhelming, that refused to be silenced. The driver opened the doors. Vincent stepped out first, then offered his hand again. Emily took it, legs unsteady, as she climbed down into the rain-washed night. Behind them, the children slept on, unaware that their world had just tilted on its axis. Inside the mansion, lights came on softly, marble floors gleaming, high ceilings arching overhead, the faint scent of polished wood and fresh coffee drifting from somewhere deep within. Emily stood in the foyer, clutching Joey closer, staring up at the staircase that curved like something from a storybook. Vincent watched her heart tearing itself apart. "She belongs here," a voice whispered. "She belongs with me." And for the first time in years, the voice did not sound like a lie. The mansion in Carroll Gardens breathed with a hush that felt almost sacred in the early hours after midnight. October 2025. Marble floors stretched cool and endless beneath Emily's bare feet. She had slipped off her sodden sneakers in the foyer and left them by the door like shed skin. The children had been carried upstairs by Vincent and two quiet members of his household staff, women in soft gray uniforms who moved with practiced calm and spoke in low, soothing tones. Emily followed behind, clutching the backpack so tightly her fingers ached every step upward, feeling like trespass. The nursery wing, two connected rooms joined by a wide archway, glowed with the gentle amber of nightlights shaped like tiny stars. Sophie and Mia slept in matching white cribs with carved wooden rails, blankets tucked with precision. Their small faces were slack in sleep, but even unconscious they carried the faint tension of children who had learned too early that safety could vanish. Joey, Lily, and Lucas had been settled in a guest suite next door, 3 single beds arranged in a half-circle, fresh linens, crisp and white pillows plump enough to swallow small heads whole. Emily stood in the doorway, watching them breathe the rise and fall so steady it hurt. She had never seen them sleep on anything softer than the thin mattress at home. The contrast sliced through her clean sheets versus threadbare cotton patched with scraps, warmth versus the wind that had seeped through every crack on winter nights when she had held them close to share what little body heat she had left. Vincent appeared silently behind her. "They're safe," he said quietly. "No one will disturb them." Emily turned. In the soft light, he looked larger, more shadowed, broad shoulders filling the doorway, dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She dropped her gaze, suddenly aware of how small she felt. Thin arms, hollow collarbones, visible above the collar of her worn sweater, hair still damp and tangled from the rain. "Thank you," she whispered, voice timid and polite, the reflex of someone who had spent years speaking carefully to people who held power over her next meal. He stepped closer but kept distance. "You should rest too. There's a room prepared." She shook her head quickly. "I'll stay here, just in case they wake." Vincent studied her for a long moment. Inside him, the conflict roared louder than the storm outside had ever been. She won't leave them, not even for sleep she desperately needs. Remorse gnawed deeper years of building an empire that thrived on fear and distance, while this woman with nothing refused to let go of the only things that mattered. The love that had ignited in the SUV burned hotter, now fierce and painful, tangled with guilt so violent it felt like his chest might crack open. "I could give her everything, and yet everything I am could destroy her." He nodded once. "I'll be down the hall if you need anything." She watched him go, heart pounding with confusion and a strange, aching curiosity. Why me? Why us? Morning arrived gray and quiet. Emily woke on the armchair she had dragged beside the children's beds, neck stiff, body heavy, with exhaustion that sleep had barely touched. The twins stirred first, blinking in confusion at the unfamiliar ceiling. Lily whimpered. Lucas sat up and looked around with wide, wary eyes. Joey woke last, rubbing his face, then froze when he saw the room. "Mama," his voice was small. "I'm here." Emily knelt quickly, gathering them close. their small bodies pressed against her warm, trusting alive. For a moment the mansion faded. There was only this. Downstairs in the kitchen, a space larger than her entire apartment, Vincent stood at the island, coffee untouched, staring at nothing. The cook, a kind-eyed woman named Rosa, set out breakfast trays, warm oatmeal with cinnamon, fresh fruit cut into perfect pieces, milk in small glasses. Vincent had asked her to keep it simple, nothing overwhelming. Yet even this felt extravagant compared to the half-loaf of bread Emily had rationed the night before. He carried one tray up himself. Emily looked up as he entered. Her face paled further if that was possible. "You didn't have to, I wanted to." He set the tray on a low table near the beds. The scent of cinnamon drifted sweet and comforting. Joey's eyes widened. Lily reached tentatively toward a sliced apple. Vincent knelt slowly, keeping his movements careful. "It's okay," he said softly to the children. "You can eat." Sophie and Mia appeared in the doorway, then drawn by the voices. They stood clutching each other's hands, staring at the newcomers with the blank caution of children who had learned strangers often brought change they could not control. Emily's heart twisted. She smiled gently at Vincent's daughters. "Hello," she said, voice soft. "I'm Emily. These are Joey, Lily, and Lucas." Sophie tilted her head. Mia hid half her face behind her sister's shoulder. Vincent watched throat tight. His girls, silent, withdrawn now, faced three small strangers who looked at them without fear. Something inside him cracked wider. Emily reached into the backpack and pulled out Joey's stuffed bear. She offered it to Sophie. "He's a good listener," she said. "When you're sad, he stays right there." Sophie hesitated, then took the bear. Her small fingers closed around it, slowly testing its softness. Mia peeked out, curious. Vincent exhaled, a sound almost like pain. They took it. They actually took something from her. The morning unfolded in quiet fragments. Emily stayed near the children, helping them eat, wiping small mouths, speaking in the low, steady tone that had soothed them through countless hungry nights. When Lucas spilled milk, she cleaned it without a word of frustration, only a gentle, "It's okay, sweetheart." When Lily grew shy and clung to her leg, Emily lifted her without strain, though her arms trembled from weakness. Vincent watched from the doorway, unable to leave. Every small act she performed tore at him. The way she portioned out bites so each child had enough. The way she hummed a soft tune when Joey grew restless. The way she never once complained about her own hunger. He saw the bruises of poverty on her sunken cheeks, thin wrists, the slight tremor in her hands, and the sight fueled a remorse so deep it bordered on violence against himself. "I've lived in this city my whole life. I've let this happen under my watch." Mid-morning, his phone buzzed. A message from one of his men. Marco's crew had been spotted near the waterfront again, testing, probing, looking for weakness. Vincent stepped into the hallway to reply, voice low. "Double the watch. No contact. But if they push, I want to know immediately." He ended the call and leaned against the wall, eyes closed. The conflict inside him surged the need to crush any threat to his family, to this fragile new thing that had entered his life, warred with the terror of dragging Emily and the children into his darkness. "If they knew who I really am." Back in the nursery, Emily had coaxed Sophie and Mia closer. She sat cross-legged on the rug, Joey beside her. She pulled a small, worn paperback from the backpack, Goodnight Moon pages, soft from countless readings. "Would you like to hear a story?" she asked the girls. Sophie nodded, almost imperceptibly. Mia inched forward. Emily began to read, voice soft and steady, turning pages with care. The children gathered around her, Joey leaning against her side, Lily in her lap, Lucas cross-legged in front. Sophie and Mia sat just outside the circle at first, then slowly edged in until Sophie's knee touched Emily's. Vincent returned quietly and stopped in the doorway. The sight hit him like a physical force, his daughters silent for so long, now listening, really listening to a woman who had nothing but kindness to give. Tears burned behind his eyes. He blinked them away fiercely. When the story ended, Emily looked up. Their eyes met across the room. In that instant, the love inside Vincent flared brighter, more consuming. It was no longer a spark, it was a blaze. He loved her for the way she gathered broken things and made them whole without asking for anything in return. The guilt that accompanied it was merciless. "I am not good enough for this. I will ruin her." Emily felt the weight of his gaze. Confusion swirled with something warmer, something that frightened her. She dropped her eyes, cheeks flushing. "He's watching like I matter, like I'm more than the waitress who barely makes rent." The moment stretched, quiet, condensed, heavy with unspoken things. Then Joey yawned, breaking the stillness. Emily gathered the children again, murmuring about naps. Vincent stepped back, retreating to the hallway, heart pounding. Outside, the city moved on, rain easing, traffic humming. Inside the mansion, two worlds had begun to overlap, one built on power and shadow, the other on endurance and light. And between them stood a woman too weary to see her own strength, and a man too haunted to believe he could deserve her. yet neither could turn away. The afternoon light in the mansion softened to pale gold, as October 2025 wore on the kind of autumn sun that promised warmth but delivered only thin, fleeting comfort through tall windows. Emily had spent the hours since breakfast moving between the nursery and the guest suite, never straying far from the 5 small bodies that now filled her world with their quiet breathing and tentative curiosity. She had bathed them one by one in the enormous marble tub water, so warm it made her own skin prickle with remembered cold, and dressed them in clothes. The housekeeper had quietly produced soft cotton pajamas in pastel colors, tags still, attached sizes perfect as though someone had measured them in advance. Emily's fingers trembled each time she fastened a button. The fabric felt too new, too clean against her calloused palms. She sat now on the rug in the nursery legs folded beneath her, Joey curled against her side while Lily and Lucas played with a set of wooden blocks that had never been touched before today. Sophie and Mia hovered at the edge of the circle, closer than they had been that morning, but still watchful. Emily hummed a low lullaby, something her own mother had sung on nights when the heat went out and the wind howled through the gaps in the walls. The sound filled the room like a blanket, steady and unhurried. Vincent stood in the hallway just beyond the archway, out of sight but close enough to hear every note. He had canceled 2 meetings that afternoon, something he never did, claiming urgent family matters. The word family had felt foreign on his tongue when he said it, yet now it settled into his chest like a stone dropped into deep water. He watched Emily through the half-open door, her thin shoulders rounded from years of carrying too much, her hair falling in tired strands across her face, the way she never once looked at the clock or sighed with impatience. Inside him, the love burned hotter, a flame fed by every small act she performed without expecting reward. It warred viciously with the guilt that had taken root years ago and grown thorns. I've profited from the kind of desperation that starved her. How can I stand here loving her when my hands are stained with the same system that broke her? His phone vibrated in his pocket, sharp, insistent. He stepped farther down the corridor before answering. Boss, came the low voice of his second-in-command. Marco's crew just rolled up on the old warehouse block in Red Hook. 4 vehicles. They're unloading marking territory. Looks like they're trying to force a response. Vincent's jaw tightened. How close? Too close. They're within 2 blocks of our south storage. If we let it slide, it's a signal. Vincent closed his eyes for a single heartbeat. The conflict inside him exploded. Part of him wanted to drive there himself, end this posturing with the swift authority he had wielded for years. The other part recoiled at the thought of leaving this house, these children, this woman, even for an hour. Hold position, he said. I'm coming. No moves until I arrive. He ended the call and returned to the doorway. Emily looked up, sensing the shift in the air. Her eyes met his soft questioning, still edged with the wariness that had not yet fully dissolved. I have to step out for a short while, he said quietly. Business. I'll be back before dinner. Emily nodded slowly. Be careful, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could catch them. She flushed, looking down at her hands. Vincent felt the simple sentence like a blow to the chest. No one had said those words to him, not with genuine concern, in longer than he could remember. He gave a small nod, throat too tight for more, and left. The streets of Red Hook were wet and shadowed when he arrived. The black SUV rolled to a stop behind a row of shipping containers. Vincent stepped out, coat, open hands, loose at his sides. Ahead, Marco's men had formed a loose line. 6 of them, arms crossed, watching as 2 others spray-painted a tag across the corrugated metal wall of the warehouse Vincent's people used for overflow storage. The air smelled of salt diesel and fresh paint. The leader, Tony, again saw him first. He straightened, a slow smile spreading. Vinny, didn't expect you to show. Thought maybe you were busy playing house. Vincent walked forward slowly, stopping 10 feet away. You're on my ground, he said, voice calm, carrying. Paint over the tag. Leave. We don't need this today. Tony laughed. Your ground. Funny how things change when you're not looking. One of Marco's men shifted hand, drifting toward his belt. Vincent's driver and 2 others stepped closer behind him, silent but present. The tension coiled thick as fog rolling off the harbor. Vincent kept his eyes on Tony. Last chance. Walk away. Tony studied him, then spat on the ground. You're losing your edge, Russo. Word is you've gone soft over some waitress and her kids. The words landed like a slap. Vincent's vision narrowed. Rage flared hot and sudden, but he forced it down. They know. They've been watching. The thought sent ice through him, not fear for himself, but terror for Emily, for the children now sleeping safely under his roof. He took 1 step closer. Paint it over, he repeated, voice low and lethal. Or tomorrow you explain to Marco why his crew lost a block, and their pride in the same afternoon. Tony held his gaze a long moment, then jerked his head. The 2 with the cans stepped forward, spraying black over the fresh tag until nothing remained but dripping shadow. The group retreated to their vehicles, engines growling to life. Tony leaned out the window as they pulled away. "This isn't over, Vinny." Vincent stood motionless until the taillights vanished. Only then did he exhale, hands shaking with the effort of restraint. The confrontation had been nothing, a warning, a probe, but it left him raw, exposed. They know about her. They know about them. The realization tore through him, guilt and protective fury twisting together until he could scarcely breathe. He returned to the mansion. As dusk settled, the sky bruised purple. The house smelled of roasting chicken and fresh bread, Rosa's doing. Laughter, small, tentative, drifted from the family room. Vincent paused in the doorway. Emily sat on the wide rug surrounded by all 5 children. Joey had built a tall tower of blocks. Lily and Lucas clapped when it wobbled. Sophie and Mia sat closer now, Sophie clutching the stuffed bear, Mia leaning against Emily's knee. Emily was showing them how to stack the blocks in a careful pattern, her voice soft and patient. "Look," she said, guiding Mia's small hand. "One on top slow. There. See? It stays." Mia's face lit with wonder. She looked up at Emily, then without warning reached out and placed her tiny palm flat against Emily's cheek, as though testing to see if she was real. Vincent's heart stopped. In that instant, Joey turned, spotting him. "Look, Mama, Sophie helped too." Emily looked up. Their eyes met again. She smiled, small, tired, beautiful, and something inside Vincent shattered. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside them. The children shifted to make space without hesitation. Sophie offered him a block. Mia reached for his hand. He took it, fingers enveloping her small ones. Emily watched him, confusion and warmth warring in her eyes. "You're back early," she said softly. Vincent could not speak at first. The love that had been burning inside him now roared, fierce and undeniable. He loved her not for what she could give him, but for what she gave without asking. Safety, gentleness, the courage to let 5 small hearts trust again. The guilt that accompanied it was merciless. "I've brought danger to her door. My world could take this away, yet it only fueled the need to protect her more." Joey tugged at his sleeve. "Play with us," Vincent nodded, throat tight. He placed the block on the tower. Outside, the city darkened. Inside, in this quiet room, a bridge had begun to form. Fragile, trembling, but growing stronger with every shared breath. And Vincent knew with a certainty that terrified him that he would burn his entire empire to the ground before he let anything harm the woman who had just taught his daughters how to hope again. The evening settled over the mansion like a heavy curtain drawn slowly across the sky. October 2025, drawing toward its close with a chill that seeped through even the thick stone walls. Dinner had passed in fragile, quiet plates of roasted chicken, steamed vegetables, warm rolls that Emily had stared at for a long moment before taking the smallest piece as though afraid it might vanish if she claimed too much. The children had eaten with wide eyes and tentative bites, then drifted to sleep one by one, their small forms tucked beneath down comforters that felt impossibly soft after years on a single thin mattress shared against the cold. Emily had stayed with them until the last eyelid fluttered shut, humming the same lullaby until her own voice grew hoarse. Now she sat alone in the wide hallway outside the nursery, back against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. The corridor lights had been dimmed to soft amber sconces. Shadows stretched long across marble floors, polished to mirror brightness. Her sweater, still the same one she had worn through rain and wind for months, hung loosely on shoulders that had grown even thinner in the past weeks of rationing. Exhaustion pressed down on her like a physical weight. Sleep had been a stranger for so long that her body no longer knew how to surrender to it fully. Every few minutes, a small sound from one of the rooms would make her straighten, listening, ready to rise despite the ache in her bones. Vincent found her there. He had been in his study, staring at reports he could not read mind elsewhere. When he stepped into the hallway and saw her small, folded in on herself, eyes distant, he felt the familiar tear inside him widen into something raw and gaping. He crossed the distance, slowly lowering himself to sit beside her on the floor, back against the opposite wall, so they faced each other across the narrow space. "You should be resting," he said quietly. Emily gave a small, tired smile. "I'm used to waiting up." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, the politeness that had become habit when speaking to anyone who held more than she did. Vincent studied her face, the hollows beneath her cheekbones, the faint purple shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly even at rest. The disparity struck him again, brutal and unrelenting, his world of heated floors, endless hot water meals prepared without thought, hers of nights spent pressed against freezing windows, stomach knotted with hunger so constant it became background noise. Remorse surged through him, violent and sickening. "I've walked past people like her every day of my life. I've profited from the edges they live on. And now she's here because of me, because I couldn't let her stay in that cold, and I still don't know how to make it right." He reached out, hesitated, then gently took one of her hands between his. Her fingers were cold, His were warm from the fire that still burned low in the study. Emily stiffened at first, old instincts of caution flaring, then slowly relaxed, letting him hold her hand as though testing the reality of the warmth. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore," he said, voice rough with emotion he could no longer mask. Emily looked down at their joined hands. Tears welled suddenly, spilling over without warning. "I don't know how to stop," she whispered. "It's all I've known." Vincent's throat closed. The love inside him, already ablaze, flared into something almost painful, consuming every corner of him. He loved her for the way she had survived, with nothing but will and gentleness. He loved her for the children she had protected through hunger and cold. He loved her for sitting here now, vulnerable and exhausted, yet still refusing to break. The guilt that rode alongside it was merciless. "My world is poison. If they ever learn who I truly am, if Marco's men ever reach her because of me, I will have destroyed the only pure thing that's touched me in years." Before he could speak again, a soft cry drifted from the nursery, small, then sharper. Emily pulled her hand free and rose instantly, legs unsteady from fatigue. Vincent followed. Inside, Joey lay curled on his side, face flushed, breathing shallow and rapid. Emily knelt beside the bed, pressing her palm to his forehead. Heat radiated against her skin. "He's burning up," she said, voice tight with sudden fear. Vincent moved to the other side of the bed, lifting Joey carefully into his arms. The boy's head lolled against his shoulder. Small whimpers escaped his lips. Emily's hands flew to the other children, Lily and Lucas, stirring now, cheeks pink, eyes glassy. She touched their foreheads in turn. Fever. All three. Horror swept through her, cold, numbing familiar from nights when Joey had coughed for hours in the freezing apartment, and she could only hold him, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "They're sick," she breathed, voice trembling. "All of them." Vincent's face hardened, not with anger, but with the fierce protectiveness that had kept him alive through darker years. "I'll call the doctor." Now. He carried Joey downstairs while Emily gathered the twins, wrapping them in blankets, despite the heat pouring from their small bodies. Sophie and Mia woke, then drawn by the quiet commotion, standing in the doorway with wide, frightened eyes. Emily knelt to them, voice steady despite the panic clawing inside her. "It's okay, sweethearts. Joey and Lily and Lucas aren't feeling well. We're going to help them." The private physician arrived within 20 minutes, summoned by a single call, no questions asked. He examined the children in the guest suite Vincent had turned into an impromptu sick room, cool cloths, thermometers, gentle voices. Fevers high, but not yet dangerous. Likely a virus moving fast through small bodies, unused to such abrupt change of environment. Fluids rest monitoring. Emily never left their sides. She sat between the beds, one hand on Joey's damp forehead, the other holding Lily's small fingers. When Lucas whimpered, she lifted him into her lap, rocking slowly despite her own trembling exhaustion. Vincent watched from the doorway, arms folded tight across his chest to keep his hands from shaking. Hours blurred. The house grew still. Except for the soft beeps of monitors, the doctor had brought the rustle of blankets. Emily's quiet murmurs of comfort. At one point, Joey's fever spiked. He thrashed, crying out in delirium. Emily leaned close, whispering the same lullaby, tears tracking silently down her cheeks. "I'm here, baby. Mama's here." Vincent knelt beside her, then unable to stay away any longer. He placed a fresh cloth on Joey's forehead, his large hand dwarfing the boy's. Joey quieted slightly at the touch, small fingers curling around Vincent's thumb. Emily looked up at him, eyes red-rimmed, face pale with worry and fatigue. "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent shook his head. Words failed him. Inside the storm raged love so fierce it felt like it might tear him apart. Guilt so deep it drowned every other feeling. "They're sick because I brought them here, because my life disrupted theirs. If I hadn't..." The thoughts circled, vicious and unrelenting. As dawn approached, the fevers began to break. Joey's breathing eased. Lily and Lucas settled into deeper sleep. Emily slumped against the headboard, eyes closing despite herself. Vincent lifted her gently, arms careful, reverent, and carried her to the armchair beside the beds. She stirred only enough to murmur, "Don't leave them." "I won't," he promised. He sat on the floor at her feet, back against the chair, watching over the 5 small forms and the woman who had become their center. The love inside him burned brighter than ever, passionate, protective, overwhelming. Yet the conflict tore deeper. "I would give anything to keep them safe. But my world is the very thing that could destroy them." Outside, the city woke slowly. Inside the mansion, in the quiet before morning, a family, unplanned, fragile, real, breathed together for the first time. And Vincent Russo, powerful and broken, understood that the healing he had sought for years had arrived not through money or control, but through the gentle hands of a woman who had once had nothing at all. The days following the fever broke like dawn after the longest night, slow and tentative, carrying a fragile light into every corner of the mansion. October 2025 lingered in crisp mornings and early dusks. the air outside carrying the faint salt of the harbor even through closed windows. Inside, the house seemed to exhale walls that had once echoed with silence, now held the small sounds of children, rediscovering play. Wooden blocks clicking together, soft laughter bubbling up unexpectedly, the patter of bare feet across marble that had never before known such life. Emily moved through the rooms with quiet purpose, her steps still careful, as though she feared the luxury might dissolve if she claimed it too boldly. She wore the same sweater most days, faded gray wool sleeves frayed at the cuffs because the new clothes hanging in the guest room closet felt like borrowed things like costumes for someone else's life. She accepted only what the children needed: soft pajamas, warm socks, a few simple dresses in gentle colors. Her own hunger had eased slightly. The meals Rosa prepared were generous, but never ostentatious, yet the habit of rationing remained etched into her bones. She still cut fruit into tiny pieces, so each child received exactly the same amount, still saved half her portion in case someone woke hungry in the night. Vincent watched her constantly from doorways, from across rooms, from the shadowed end of hallways. He had cleared his schedule as much as a man in his position could, postponing meetings, delegating calls, letting his men handle the streets while he stayed close. Every time Emily bent to tie a shoelace or lift a child onto her hip, he felt the pull inside him sharpen love so fierce it bordered on pain, guilt so deep it left him breathless. He saw the thinness of her wrists when she reached for a glass of water, the faint tremor when she lifted Lucas after a long day, the way she sometimes pressed a hand to her side as though steadying herself against an old ache. She carried them alone through winters I never felt. She starved so they could eat. And I. The thought always broke off unfinished because the rest was too brutal to name. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the family room, turning the rug into a golden sea. The children had spread out across it, Joey building a lopsided fort with cushions, Lily and Lucas crawling inside, giggling, Sophie and Mia sitting nearby with coloring books, crayons rolling gently across the pages. Emily knelt among them, helping Mia choose a blue for the sky. Her hair fell forward. She tucked it behind her ear with an absent gesture that made Vincent's chest tighten. He entered quietly, carrying a tray of sliced apples and cheese. Simple, nothing extravagant. He set it down and sat on the edge of the rug, knees drawn up like the children. Joey looked up first. "Mr. Vincent, come in the fort." Vincent hesitated only a moment, then crawled inside the cushion cave. The space was small. His shoulders brushed the improvised walls. The children crowded around him, small hands patting his arms, voices overlapping in excitement. Emily watched from outside, a soft smile curving her lips, despite the sudden sting of tears in her eyes. No one had ever played like this with them before, not like this, not without expectation. Later, when the children napped, Vincent found her in the kitchen, rinsing plates at the sink. She had insisted on helping Rosa, though Rosa had protested gently. Emily's hands moved in slow circles under the warm water soap bubbles catching the light. Vincent leaned against the island, arms folded. "You don't have to do that. I want to." Her voice was soft, almost shy. "It helps me feel useful." He stepped closer. "You are useful. More than you know." She looked up, then water dripping from her fingers. Their eyes met longer than before, heavier. The air between them thickened with unspoken things. Vincent reached out slowly, brushing a damp strand of hair from her cheek. His thumb lingered against her skin, warm against cool. Emily froze, breath catching. Fear flickered, first old instincts warning her to pull away, then curiosity, then something deeper, warmer, terrifying in its intensity. Vincent's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Emily." She searched his face, powerful, haunted, achingly open. "I don't understand," she breathed. "Why me? Why any of this?" He exhaled, the sound ragged. "Because the moment I saw you in the rain, standing against 3 men who could have crushed you, I knew I'd never be the same. Because you looked at your children like they were the only thing worth fighting for. Because..." His hand slid to cup her cheek fully now, thumb tracing the hollow beneath her eye. "Because I love you. I've loved you since that first night, and it's only grown stronger. It hurts how much." Emily's knees buckled slightly. She gripped the edge of the sink to steady herself. Shock numbed, her dizziness swept in waves, her vision blurring at the edges. No one had ever said those words to her. Not her father who left, not the men who passed through her life with empty promises, not even herself in the mirror on the worst nights. Tears spilled hot and fast. Vincent caught her as she swayed, arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her gently against him. She stiffened at first body, remembering every time she had been touched without kindness, then slowly melted forehead resting against his chest. His heartbeat thundered beneath her ear, strong and unsteady. "I'm scared," she whispered into his shirt. "This isn't my world. I don't belong here. You belong wherever you are safe," he said fiercely. "And I will make sure you are safe. Always." He tilted her chin up. Their faces were inches apart. The kiss came slowly, hesitant, at first testing, then deeper, desperate, as though both had been starving for something neither knew how to name until now. Emily's hands fisted in his shirt. Vincent's fingers threaded through her hair, holding her like she might disappear. The kiss tasted of salt and relief, and years of unspoken longing. When they broke apart, both were trembling. Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I won't let my life hurt you," he vowed, voice cracking. "I swear it." Emily closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "I believe you," she breathed. "God help me, I do." Outside, the city moved on, traffic, humming lights flickering to life against the dusk. Inside the mansion, in the quiet kitchen, two people stood wrapped in each other, hearts tearing and mending in the same breath. Later that evening, Vincent stepped outside for air coat slung over his shoulders. He walked the perimeter of the property, mind churning. At the gate, headlights swept across the street, two dark sedans idling slowly past. Marco's men. They did not stop, did not speak, but the message was clear, watching, waiting. Vincent stood motionless until they vanished around the corner. Rage flared, hot familiar, then cooled into something colder, resolve. They will not touch her. They will not touch them. He turned back toward the house, steps quickening. Inside, Emily sat by the window in the family room, watching the children play quietly before bedtime. She looked up as Vincent entered, saw the tension in his shoulders, the shadow in his eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. He crossed to her, knelt at her feet, took both her hands in his. "It will be," he said. "I promise." She searched his face, then leaned forward and kissed him again, slow, deliberate, pouring every ounce of trust she had left into the touch. Vincent's arms came around her, fierce and protective, the kiss deepening until the world narrowed to the heat between them, the steady beat of two hearts, learning to match. When they parted, Emily rested her head on his shoulder. "We'll face it together," she whispered. Vincent held her tighter. The love inside him burned brighter than any fear, any guilt, any threat waiting in the dark. And in that moment, the mansion, once cold and silent, felt for the first time like home. The late October days of 2025 grew shorter, the light thinning until the mansion's windows reflected only the soft glow of interior lamps by mid-afternoon. Inside, the rhythm had settled into something almost peaceful. Children's voices rising and falling in gentle waves, the clink of spoons against porcelain at mealtimes. Emily's quiet footsteps moving from room to room like a heartbeat keeping time. She had begun to accept small things, a new sweater that fit without swallowing her thin frame, a pair of shoes without holes at the soles, though each acceptance came with a flicker of guilt, as though taking comfort betrayed the years she had survived without it. Her body still carried the marks of hunger and cold wrists, delicate as bird bones, shoulders rounded from nights spent, curled protectively around sleeping children, eyes that sometimes drifted to distant memory when the house grew too quiet. Vincent moved through those days like a man walking a narrow ledge. Every glance at Emily, every shared touch, every moment the children reached for him without hesitation, widened the fissure inside him. The love that had ignited so suddenly now burned with a steady, consuming heat. He woke each morning with her name already on his lips, fell asleep each night, replaying the feel of her hand in his. Yet the guilt never quieted. It roared louder in the silences. "This happiness is stolen. My world will come to collect it." He had doubled the security around the property, more men at the gates, cameras sweeping every angle, but the threat lingered like smoke he could not quite see. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, sudden and merciless. Emily had taken the children to the walled garden behind the house, a space of trimmed hedges, stone paths, and a small fountain that bubbled softly even in autumn. The air carried the faint scent of damp leaves and wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. Joey ran ahead laughing as he chased fallen leaves. Lily and Lucas toddled behind, hands linked. Sophie and Mia walked close to Emily, each holding one of her hands. She smiled down at them, small, tired, radiant, and for a moment the weight of everything lifted. Vincent watched from an upstairs window coat, off sleeves rolled to his elbows. The sight of them together, 5 small figures moving through sunlight, Emily at the center, like gravity itself, tore something deep inside him. "This is what I never knew I needed, and I will kill to keep it." His phone buzzed sharply on the desk behind him. He answered without looking. "Yes." The voice on the other end belonged to his driver, low, urgent, cracking at the edges. "Boss, they're gone." The garden gate, someone cut the lock from the outside. They took them. All 5. The world tilted. Vincent's vision narrowed to a pinpoint. He was already moving down the stairs, through the foyer, out the back doors, before the words fully registered. The garden lay empty, scattered leaves, a single crayon rolling slowly across the stone path, the fountain still bubbling as though nothing had changed. Emily's sweater, gray wool frayed at the cuffs, lay crumpled near the fountain, torn at one sleeve. Vincent dropped to his knees, fingers closing around the fabric. Her scent lingered, faintly soap and faint vanilla from the lotion Rosa had given her. His hands shook so violently the wool slipped through his fingers. Inside him, everything shattered. Rage, white-hot blinding, crashed against terror so profound it numbed him. They took her. They took the children. The guilt that had simmered for weeks now boiled over into something violent and self-destructive. This is my fault. My war. My enemies. I brought this to her door. He rose coat forgotten and strode toward the garage. His men were already gathering faces, pale weapons holstered but ready. He barked orders without raising his voice, checkpoints, traffic cameras, every contact in the city. Marco's name hung unspoken between them. No one needed to say it. The first lead came within the hour, a grainy image from a traffic camera 3 blocks away, 2 black vans, tinted windows, moving fast toward the industrial edge of Red Hook. Vincent climbed into the lead SUV, himself driver, accelerating before the door even closed. The confrontation came at an abandoned lot near the water chain-link fence, sagging weeds pushing through cracked asphalt, the smell of salt and rust thick in the air. Marco's men waited in a loose semicircle, 8 of them arms crossed, faces hidden beneath hoods. Tony stood at the center, smirking. Vincent stepped out alone, Hand's visible voice carrying across the empty space. "Where are they?" Tony tilted his head. "Safe. For now. Marco wants a sit-down. You've been distracted, Vinny. Time to remind you who runs this city." Vincent's hands clenched at his sides. The love inside him, fierce, protective, twisted into something almost feral. "You took children. You took her. You think there's a negotiation after that?" Tony's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Business is business. You want them back, you meet Marco. Tonight. Alone." Vincent took 1 step forward. "Tell Marco he has until midnight. After that, I stop asking nicely." Tony studied him, saw the raw edge beneath the calm, and nodded once. The men backed away slowly, vehicles starting up behind them. Vincent remained motionless until they disappeared into the dusk. Back at the mansion, he stood in the empty garden, Emily's sweater still clutched in one fist. His men watched from a distance, silent, uncertain. He had never looked like this, eyes hollow, shoulders bowed under an invisible weight. He lifted the sweater to his face, inhaling the faint trace of her. Tears came, then silent burning, sliding down cheeks that had not known them in years. Emily, Joey, Lily, Lucas, Sophie, Mia. Their names looped through him like prayer and curse together. He sank to his knees on the cold stone forehead, pressed to the fabric. "I'm coming," he whispered. "I swear I'm coming." Across the city, in a dim warehouse on the waterfront, Emily sat on the concrete floor, back against a rusted pillar, 5 small bodies pressed against her. Her arms encircled them all, Joey in her lap. Lily and Lucas tucked under each arm, Sophie and Mia clinging to her sides. The children were quiet now, exhaustion overtaking fear, though every few minutes one of them would whimper and bury their face deeper into her sweater. Emily's own heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy vision swimming at the edges. She had fought when they took them, clawing, kicking, screaming until a hand clamped over her mouth, but she had stopped the moment they threatened the children. Now she sat motionless, whispering comforts into small ears, stroking hair with trembling fingers. "I've got you," she breathed again and again. "I've got you." Inside, her terror and fury collided in violent waves. "They can't have them. I won't let them." Yet beneath the fear lay something colder, the old humiliation of powerlessness, the memory of nights when she could not even keep them warm. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and endless. She thought of Vincent, his face, when he held her the promise in his voice and clung to it like a lifeline. "He'll come. He has to come." Outside the warehouse, Marco's men stood guard, voices low. Inside, Emily held 5 small hearts against her chest and waited. And somewhere in the dark between them, Vincent Russo drove through the city like a man possessed. Love and guilt and rage fused into a single burning purpose. He would bring them home, or he would burn everything down trying. The warehouse on the waterfront smelled of rust and old motor oil, the kind of scent that clung to clothes and skin long after you left. October 2025 had turned colder overnight. Wind off the harbor sliced through the broken windows high above, carrying the distant moan of foghorns. Inside, Emily sat on the cold concrete floor, knees drawn up, 5 small bodies pressed against her in a tight knot of warmth. Joey's head rested in her lap, his breathing shallow but steady now. Lily and Lucas clung to each side, faces buried in her sweater. Sophie and Mia held hands across her chest, eyes wide and glassy in the dim emergency lighting. Emily's arms encircled them all, muscles aching from hours of holding the same protective circle. Her own body trembled, not just from cold, but from the bone-deep exhaustion that had returned like an old enemy. She had not eaten since the garden. Her stomach had long ago stopped protesting and settled into the familiar hollow ache she knew from too many lean winters. She whispered to them in the quiet moments between guard footsteps outside the metal door, soft words, half lullaby, half promise. "We're going to be okay. Someone's coming." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she swallowed it down. The children needed her steady. Inside, terror and grief twisted together until she could scarcely breathe. They're so small. They shouldn't know fear like this. Memories flashed nights in the walk-up when the heat failed, and she had wrapped them in every layer she owned, pressing her body around them like a shield against the wind that slipped through cracked windows. The humiliation of it returned, now sharper than ever. She had finally found safety, warmth, someone who looked at her like she mattered, and it had been ripped away in minutes. Across the city, Vincent moved through the shadows of Red Hook like a man already half gone. He had come alone against every instinct, every warning from his men because Marco had demanded it. The meet was set for an old cannery, 2 blocks from the warehouse, rusted girders, broken skylights, letting in slivers of moonlight, the floor littered with shattered glass that crunched underfoot. Vincent walked the last 100 yards with hands visible, coat open, pistol left behind in the SUV. He carried only the weight of his promise. Marco waited in the center of the empty space, flanked by 4 men. Tony stood slightly behind him, arms folded, smirk gone. Marco, older than Vincent by 10 years, face carved with lines of long ambition, tilted his head as Vincent approached. "You came," Marco said, voice carrying across the echoey space. "No tricks. Good." Vincent stopped 10 feet away. "Where are they? Safe?" "For now." Marco gestured to a folding chair someone had dragged into the center. "Sit. We talk terms." Vincent did not move. "You took children. You took her. There are no terms." Marco studied him, saw the raw edge beneath the calm, and smiled thinly. "You've changed, Vinny. Used to be you understood leverage. Now you're soft, distracted. That's why you're losing ground." Vincent's hands flexed at his sides. Inside him the storm raged, love for Emily burning so fiercely it felt like it might consume him, whole guilt crashing against it in violent waves. "I let my guard down. I let them become targets." The remorse was physical, chest-tight vision, narrowing until the world reduced to Marco's face. Marco continued. "You step back from the waterfront. You give me the South storage contracts. In return, you get them back. Simple." Vincent's voice came low, lethal. "No deal." Marco sighed, almost theatrical. "Then we do this the hard way." He nodded once. From the shadows behind Vincent, a figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate. One of Vincent's own men, Polly, who had driven for him for 8 years, who had stood at his side through every war. Polly held a pistol loosely at his side barrel, pointed at Vincent's back. Vincent did not flinch. He had felt the betrayal the moment Polly moved, had sensed the shift in the air, but hearing it confirmed felt like a blade sliding between ribs. Polly's voice was quiet, almost regretful. "Sorry, boss." Marco made a better offer. Vincent turned slowly. "You sold them out. 5 children. A woman who never hurt anyone." Polly looked away. "Business." Vincent's gaze returned to Marco. "You think this ends with me?" Marco shrugged. "It ends with you gone. Then the city's mine." Silence stretched thick, suffocating. Then a sound, soft footsteps from the side entrance. Emily appeared in the doorway, hair, wild sweater torn further at the sleeve face, streaked with dust and tears. Behind her, the 5 children clung to her legs, eyes huge in the dim light. She had slipped out during a guard change, using the same back alley knowledge she had once used to avoid trouble at the diner, moving through shadows until she found the cannery. In her right hand, trembling but steady, she held an old service revolver, her father's, the one keepsake she had kept wrapped in cloth at the bottom of her backpack all these years. She had taken it from the warehouse guard who thought she was too broken to fight. Emily's voice soft, trembling, but clear-cut through the stillness. "Let them go." Marco turned slowly. His men raised weapons. Vincent stepped in front of her, instinctively, arms out. "Emily." She did not look at him. Her eyes were locked on Marco, on Polly. "You don't touch them again." The children pressed closer to her legs, Joey clutching her sweater, Lily and Lucas hiding their faces. Sophie and Mia holding hands so tightly their knuckles showed white. Vincent's heart tore open. She came for them. She came alone. Love surged through him. Fierce, overwhelming, blinding, mingled with horror that she was here in the crosshairs of his war. Marco laughed once, short, ugly. The waitress with a gun. "Cute." Emily raised the revolver slowly. Her hand shook, but her voice did not. "Walk away. Or I shoot." One of Marco's men shifted. Vincent moved faster, stepping between Emily and the line of fire, hands still raised. "Enough," he said to Marco. "You want the territory, take it. But they walk. Now." Marco studied him, saw the desperation beneath the calm, and nodded once. "Fine. But this isn't over," he signaled. His men backed toward the far doors, Polly last eyes down. Marco lingered a moment longer. "You're finished, Vinny. You chose wrong." Then he was gone. The warehouse fell silent, except for the wind and the children's soft whimpers. Vincent turned to Emily. She lowered the revolver slowly, legs giving out. He caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her and the children into his arms all at once. 5 small bodies and 1 trembling woman wrapped against him safe. Emily buried her face in his chest. "I thought I lost them," she whispered. "I thought I lost you." Vincent held her tighter, tears burning his eyes. Never, never again. He lifted her carefully, then gathered the children, Joey in one arm. Lily and Lucas held close with the other, Sophie and Mia clinging to his legs. They walked out into the night together, slow, unsteady, but unbroken. Behind them, the warehouse stood empty. Ahead, the city lights glittered cold, distant, but no longer threatening. Vincent carried them home, and in the quiet of that walk, with Emily's head resting against his shoulder and 5 small hearts beating against his, he understood redemption was not a single act. It was every breath he would take from now on to keep them safe. The night after the cannery had bled into a gray, rain-soaked dawn on the last day of October 2025. The mansion stood quiet again, too quiet, its high windows reflecting only the pale wash of streetlights and the restless flicker of clouds scudding low across the harbor sky. Inside, the children slept in the nursery wing under heavy blankets, faces slack with the kind of deep exhaustion that follows terror. Emily had stayed with them until the last small hand loosened its grip on her sweater, until their breathing evened into the slow rhythm of safety reclaimed. Only then did she slip into the hallway, bare feet silent on marble, and find Vincent in his study. He stood at the tall window, back to the door, coat still on shoulders rigid. The room smelled faintly of coffee gone cold, and the sharp bite of gun oil, remnants of the weapons he had cleaned and recleaned in the hours since bringing them home. Emily paused in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, the frayed hem of her sweater brushing her wrists. "Vincent," he turned slowly. In the low lamplight, his face looked carved from stone eyes, shadowed jaw set so tight a muscle jumped beneath the skin. When he saw her, something cracked, the hard line of his mouth softened just barely, and he crossed the room in 3 long strides. She met him halfway. His arms came around her instantly, fierce, careful, trembling. Emily pressed her face to his chest, inhaling the scent of rain and leather and him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of their breathing filled the space between them. "They're asleep," she whispered finally. "All of them." Vincent rested his chin on the top of her head. "Good." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "You're shaking." He gave a small, broken laugh. "I thought I'd lost you. All of you." Emily reached up, fingertips brushing the line of his jaw. "We're here." His eyes searched hers, dark, haunted, burning with everything he could not yet say. The love inside him surged again, hotter than before, tangled so tightly with guilt, it felt like it might tear him apart from the inside. "I almost got them killed. I almost lost the only thing that ever mattered." He swallowed hard. "I have to end this," he said quietly. "Tonight." Emily's breath caught. "No. Not alone. I have to." His voice cracked on the last word. "Marco won't stop. He'll come again, harder, closer. I won't let him near you. Near them." She shook her head, tears welling. "Then we leave. We disappear." "You don't have to. I can't run forever." He cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away the tears that fell. "And I won't let you live looking over your shoulder. Not anymore." Emily's knees buckled slightly. He steadied her without hesitation. Confusion and fear collided inside her, dizziness swept in, making the room tilt. She had spent years surviving by staying small, staying quiet, staying alive. The thought of him walking into danger alone felt like a blade twisting in her chest. Yet beneath the terror lay something new, trust so deep it terrified her. He would die for us, and I would die for him. She pressed her forehead to his. "Promise you'll come back." Vincent closed his eyes. "I promise." He kissed her, then slow, desperate, pouring every unspoken vow into the touch. When they parted, both were trembling. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "More than anything." Emily nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. He left an hour later, black coat, no weapons visible, only the weight of resolve in his step. Emily watched from an upstairs window until the taillights of the SUV vanished into the rain. Vincent drove alone to the old pier at the edge of Red Hook, the place Marco had chosen for the final meet. The wind howled off the water, whipping his coat around his legs. He stepped out onto the weathered boards, hands loose at his sides. Marco waited at the far end, flanked by 6 men. No smirk this time, only cold calculation. "You came," Marco said. "No tricks." Vincent stopped 20 feet away. "No tricks. You want the territory. It's yours. I'm out." Marco tilted his head. "Just like that, just like that." Vincent's voice was steady, but inside the storm raged love for Emily, terror for the children, guilt so thick it choked him. "This ends tonight. One way or another." Marco studied him a long moment. Then he nodded to one of his men. The man stepped forward, holding a small black case. Inside, documents transferring control of the waterfront contracts. Vincent signed without reading, pen scratching across paper in the wind. Marco took the case back. Smart choice. Vincent turned to leave. Marco's voice stopped him. One more thing. Vincent paused. Marco gestured. From the shadows at the pier's edge, Polly emerged, hands bound, mouth taped, eyes wide with fear. Two of Marco's men held him upright. Loose end, Marco said simply. Thought you'd want to see it tied off. Vincent's stomach dropped. They're going to kill him, right here, in front of me. He took a step forward. Let him go. Marco laughed short, ugly. You don't give orders anymore. The man beside Polly raised a pistol. Vincent moved without thought, lunging forward, shoving the gunman's arm upward. The shot cracked into the night sky, deafening. Chaos erupted. Marco's men surged. Vincent fought with bare hands, years of training, turning every motion into survival. He took a fist to the jaw, another to the ribs, pain blooming hot, but he did not stop until Polly was free, stumbling behind him. Marco watched, unmoved. You're done, Vinny. Vincent stood between Polly and the line of guns, chest heaving, blood trickling from his lip. Then finish it. Silence, stretched wind, waves, distant horns. Then headlights cut through the dark. Emily's old station wagon, the one Vincent had quietly replaced tires on weeks earlier, skidded to a stop at the pier entrance. She stepped out alone, hair whipping in the wind, face pale but set. In her hand, the revolver again raised steady despite the shaking. Get in the car, she called to Polly. Polly hesitated, looked at Vincent. Go, Vincent said. Polly ran. Marco's men turned toward her. Vincent roared, a sound torn from his chest, and charged. He reached Marco, first tackled him to the boards, pinning him. The other men froze, guns wavering between two targets. Emily's voice cut through the wind, soft but carrying. Enough! She fired once into the air. The shot echoed across the water. Marco shoved Vincent off, rolling to his feet. You think this changes anything? Vincent rose slowly, blood on his teeth. It ends here. You walk away. I walk away. No more. Marco stared at him, saw the raw desperation, the love that had stripped him to bone and will, and something shifted. Not mercy. Calculation. He nodded once. His men lowered their weapons. Marco backed toward his vehicle. You're a ghost now, Russo. Stay gone. They left. Vincent stood motionless until the taillights disappeared. Then he turned. Emily ran to him, dropped the revolver, threw herself into his arms. He caught her, lifted her off the ground, buried his face in her hair. You came, he choked out. I couldn't let you do it alone. He held her tighter, tears mixing with rain on both their faces. They stood like that for long minutes, wind howling, waves crashing the city lights, glittering cold and distant behind them. Then Vincent pulled back just enough to look at her. I'm done, he said. The life, the war, all of it. We leave. Tonight. Emily searched his eyes. The children, they'll be safe. We'll be safe. She nodded, slow, certain. He kissed her, fierce, desperate, full of everything he had almost lost. When they parted, he took her hand. They walked back to the car together, slow, bruised, but unbroken. Behind them, the pier stood empty. Ahead, a new dawn waited, gray, uncertain, but theirs. And in Vincent's chest, the storm finally quieted. Not gone, but no longer tearing him apart. Only love remained fierce, steady, and enough. The first light of November crept across Brooklyn's rooftops on the morning after the pier, pale and hesitant as though unsure it had permission to shine. Inside the mansion in Carroll Gardens, silence held for the first time in days, not the heavy silence of grief or fear, but the soft, breathing quiet of people who had walked through fire and found each other on the other side. The children still slept upstairs, small chests rising and falling beneath blankets that no longer felt like borrowed luxury, but like home. Emily stood barefoot in the wide kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea Rosa had left warming on the counter. Steam curled upward, brushing her cheeks, which were still flushed from crying, from relief, from everything at once. Vincent entered quietly, coat gone, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark hair damp from the quick shower he had taken to wash away the night. He stopped in the doorway, watching her. She looked smaller in the vast room, thin frame swallowed by the oversized sweater she still wore, hair falling in tired strands, but there was a steadiness in her posture now, a quiet strength that had not been there before. When she turned and saw him, her eyes filled instantly. He crossed the space between them without a word, took the mug from her trembling hands, set it aside, and pulled her into his arms. Emily went willingly, face pressing into the warm hollow of his throat. His heartbeat thundered against her ear, fast, unsteady, alive. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. Tears tracked silently down her cheeks. "I thought, when I heard the shot..." Vincent cupped her face, thumbs brushing the tears away. "I'm here. We're here." The kiss that followed was not gentle. It was desperate, hungry, full of everything they had, almost lost fear, relief, love so fierce it bordered on pain. Emily's fingers curled into his shirt. Vincent's hands slid into her hair, holding her as though she might vanish if he let go. When they parted, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "I'm done," he said again, voice rough. "No more shadows. No more deals. I told my men last night I'm out. Completely. The contracts are gone. The territory is Marco's if he wants it. I don't care. I only care about this." His arms tightened around her. "About you. About them." Emily searched his eyes. "You're giving up everything. I'm gaining everything." He swallowed hard. "I spent years building walls to keep the guilt out. I thought power would make me safe. It only made me alone. Then you walked in cold, tired, carrying 3 children on nothing but will, and you showed me what real strength looks like. You showed me love doesn't need money or control. It just needs someone willing to stay." Tears spilled over again. "I was so scared," she admitted. "Every day in that apartment, every night, the wind came through the cracks. I told myself if I could just keep them warm, just keep them fed, it would be enough. But it was never enough. I felt so small, so useless. And then you looked at me like I was enough, like I was more than the waitress who couldn't pay rent." Vincent's throat worked. "You were always enough. I was the one who wasn't." They stood like that for long minutes, wrapped in each other, breathing together until small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Joey appeared first, rubbing his eyes, then Lily and Lucas trailing behind Sophie and Mia, holding hands. They paused at the doorway, watching their mother and Vincent with wide, solemn eyes. Emily knelt, opening her arms. The children ran to her small bodies, colliding arms wrapping around her neck, her waist, her legs. Vincent dropped to one knee beside her, and they reached for him, 2 tiny hands patting his shoulders, his face as though making sure he was real. Joey looked up at Vincent. "Are you staying?" Vincent's voice cracked. "Yes, Joey. I'm staying. Forever." The boy nodded once, small, certain, and pressed his face into Vincent's chest. Later that morning, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. They gathered in the garden, blankets spread on the damp grass thermoses of hot chocolate plates of sliced fruit and warm bread. The children played quietly at first, then with growing confidence, Joey kicking a ball, Lily and Lucas chasing leaves, Sophie and Mia building small towers of stones. Emily sat beside Vincent on the blanket shoulder pressed to his, watching them. Vincent took her hand, laced their fingers together. "I want to marry you," he said quietly. "Not because of what happened. Not because I owe you. Because I love you. Because I want to spend every day proving I'm worthy of the trust you gave me when you had every reason not to." Emily turned to him, eyes shining. "I want that too. But not in a big way. Just us, the children. A quiet promise." He nodded. "A quiet promise." They married 3 days later in a small chapel near the harbor, no guests except Rosa, and 2 of Vincent's most trusted men who had chosen to stay as friends, not soldiers. The children stood beside them, Joey, holding the rings on a velvet pillow, Lily and Lucas scattering petals from a basket, Sophie and Mia clutching small bouquets of white roses. Emily wore a simple cream dress Rosa had found in a boutique downtown. Vincent wore a dark suit without a tie. The vows were quiet, spoken with voices that trembled only once when Vincent promised to protect her heart the way she had protected his. Afterward, they walked back to the mansion, hand in hand, children skipping ahead. The city moved around them, cars, voices, life, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like background. That evening, they sat on the patio, blankets draped over shoulders, mugs of cocoa warming small hands. The children leaned against their parents, eyes heavy with happy tiredness. Emily rested her head on Vincent's shoulder. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I never thought they would smile again," he said softly, watching Sophie and Mia giggle over a shared cookie. Emily squeezed his hand. "They were waiting for you. For us." Vincent looked down at her, thin, beautiful, unbreakable, and felt the last of the guilt loosen its grip. Not gone, never fully gone, but quieter now, softened by love. The lesson here is simple yet profound. Knowledge of the heart's true capacity for healing comes only when we allow ourselves to be seen. Each moment teaches a lesson in compassion, reminding us that no amount of wealth or power can replace genuine human connection. True education of the soul happens in the quiet acts of staying, of choosing love over fear of building rather than breaking. Another lesson emerges from the courage to let go of old identities and embrace new beginnings. Through knowledge of suffering, we learn empathy. Through the lesson of forgiveness, we find peace. This education in humility shows that love recognizes no boundary of skin color, no divide between wealth and poverty. Compassion flows freely when hearts open. One more knowledge reveals itself. True strength lies not in control, but in vulnerability. The greatest lesson of all is that love once given without condition returns multiplied. And through this education of the spirit, we understand that every life, no matter how broken, can be mended with patience and grace. To everyone watching this video, I wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, please let me know in the comments. How did it make you feel? Does it remind you of anything in your own life? Share your thoughts, your emotions, your stories. I read every single one, and it means the world to hear what moves you deep inside. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. New videos come every day, heartfelt stories, lessons wrapped in love, moments that remind us what really matters. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.